Hello and welcome to our July 3rd Tuesday at 3 series event where we're going to talk about checking your IT blind spots. I'm Allen Falcon, CEO of Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week for joining us here live or for watching this recording on demand. Before we get into the session, for those attending live, you'll note the audio is muted. This prevents any background noise from getting in the way. So at any time you have a question or a comment, please click on the icon along the top or right-hand side of your screen and open up the questions window. It lets me track to make sure we've got your questions answered before we wrap up for the day. Additionally, the session, as all of our web events are, is being recorded. We generally get things posted within 24 hours. We'll send you a note with the link. Feel free to share. And as you may already know, our 3 at 3 series is one of many resources we offer in our resource center, which includes actually ways to view information through our different webcast series and recordings, to receive information in the form of our weekly bulletins and our monthly newsletter, or to research things in our library or through our blog, where we blog several times a month. So feel free to take advantage of that at any time that's convenient for you. And if there's information you're looking for that we don't have in the Resource Center, let us know. We're happy to help you track it down. So when we talk about blind spot, what do we mean? I think most of us who drive know the understanding of a blind spot. It's the area that when you look in the mirrors, you can't necessarily see the car or the people or the bicyclist that's next to you. You have to adjust your head, look over your shoulder in your car, tilt for the mirrors in a truck to get a feel. So what do we mean when it comes to blind spot? And I should say that graphic's cool because it shows, but my favorite graphic of blind spot is this Larson cartoon from The Far Side, in particular because it illustrates how quickly items in your blind spot could catch up to you. And so a little bit of humor there. So when we look at the blind spot, we're going to talk about 7 different blind spots that we see to be fairly common among small and mid-sized organizations. And the first is security and privacy. And not that security and privacy is a blind spot, but it's really understanding and having the appropriate level of security and privacy protections in place. And so most small and mid-sized organizations have antivirus on their computers. They have decent passwords, if not necessarily strong ones, or good password hygiene, and they'll have basic backup and recovery. But your core security should include multi or two-factor authentication, often known as MFA or 2FA, as well as other services. For email, you really need advanced threat protection that pre-screens messages to validate the sender, to validate that it hasn't been tampered with en route, and to identify any potential risks. Advanced endpoint protection for your devices. That includes not just protection, but detection and response. And so this isn't just saying, hey, we've got a list of viruses and we're going to see if when you open a file, it's in there. This is actually going to look at behavior files of the system as it's executing, generate alerts, and the better systems that are available now that are still very affordable will even roll back damage that starts to be done by malicious code. You need to have things encrypted. Certainly only use secure websites, HTTPS:/. You need that S in there. But it's great to have your data not only encrypted in transit, but at rest. This means your hard drive should be properly encrypted, as well as the data stored in the cloud should be through a service that encrypts it or makes it unreadable, human unreadable. And finally, when it comes to backup and recovery services, they should be immutable. What this means is that the normal operation of your network and your computers can't alter the content of the backup. Generally, it means the backup is stored on a different device that's not a direct connection to your network, and that the software that does the backup prevents any spread of virus to the backup system that could corrupt the backup database and the backed up files. Now, when we look at security, we have our CPR model that we've talked about often: communication and education, prevention and protection, and recovery and response. And all of these and how much you do for C, P, and R does depend on the complexity, the size, and the needs of your business. And we build scaled security and privacy capabilities into our managed clouds services. So the scope of what you're getting across CPR and our essentials package is, gets added to when we go into our basic package or our business package or one of our customized premium packages. And so those options are available for you. Second blind spot is duplicate services. And there's a trap, right? We want to be more efficient. Cloud presents a really low barrier to entry. Someone shares a document by Dropbox with you. To read it, you create your free Dropbox account. Next thing you know, pop up in Dropbox saying, hey, you get these other features if you start paying for it. And boom, you've tried something new, you've added a new service. And over time, we tend to accumulate multiple services that provide similar functions. And so the escape out of this trap is really to go and be proactive and actively look for duplicate services that are in place. And the trap is onerous because it costs money. And you can also end up having people, one or two people using a service that no one else is. Information can get lost or you can lose track of it. So you want to find duplicates. Definitely look at federated logins. If you're using Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, it's pretty easy for the administrator to identify what systems each person is using that identity, that Microsoft or Google identity, as the login ID for. And so if you're using Google Workspace and you're in Chrome and you go to a website and it has a login, it'll give you that option of use Google or use Microsoft. When you click on those, it's a federated login, so you can track those. You should also be looking at credit card charges, particularly if it's a service the company decided to use. It's out there. Around it, though, to prevent this from happening, we recommend a simple set of policies and procedures that sets expectation with your employees that they shouldn't be signing on for their own services. This will help with shadow IT, but it'll also prevent these duplicates. You should also, as part of your procedures, have a way that people know that they can request to get a new capability. So if someone says, gee, we're working with this client, we really need a simple project planning tool, it's not them just going off and picking one and adding it, or even IT picking one and adding it and having sit there and duplicate something. It's, well, okay, let's look at what you need. Do our existing systems offer that? So for example, Microsoft 365 has a simple project planning tool called Planner that you can deploy. You don't necessarily need to go pay for a third party. So review the needs. Can you meet those needs completely or well enough with the existing software and systems? Or do you need to add something to the official company list? And finally, educate. So making sure your team knows how to use tools you already have is a great way to prevent them from asking for tools and accidentally creating duplicate tools. And I'll tell you, the most common ones we see are people who are paying for web meeting services, whether it's GoTo, WebEx, Zoom, or others, and not using Microsoft Teams or Google Meets. And when we talk to companies about it, it's, oh, we're not used to it. We haven't really used it much. We started using Zoom during the pandemic. We're familiar with it. So there again, a little bit of education can cut hundreds of dollars a month off your IT costs. Next, I sort of alluded to it, is shadow IT. We used to define shadow IT as any IT service used without vetting or authorization. We're now adding to it any consumer-grade IT service. Why? Because in smaller businesses, we're seeing IT professionals making the decision to go with consumer-grade solutions because in some aspects they're often cheaper, and in some aspects they can be easier. But what you lose with shadow IT, you lose control and visibility. You can run into issues with information security and privacy compliance. It's an unknown expansion of attack services. Every time you create an account, you create a potential vulnerability. You can end up with lost data, not properly protecting your information, intellectual property, or those of your clients. It creates inefficiencies when you've got different people working on different systems, and over time, it can actually add quite a bit of cost. And so how do you solve this blind spot? One, you have to look for it. Policies and procedures to prevent it from happening in the first place. You need to seek out shadow IT in use, right? And so you're going to go back again, look at employees' credit card. Are they expensing a tool that you didn't authorize? listen. If you have employees dealing with the client and they're like, oh yeah, we'll share it in the Dropbox, and Dropbox isn't part of your official IT stack, listen up. Communicate about this. Help people understand the reasoning why you don't want to do it. And probably most importantly, educate and train. Make sure people know the capabilities of the tools and how to use them efficiently, and provide the support so that if they say, hey, I'm trying to do XYZ and I'm having trouble with it, you can show them how to do it. And if you can't, then you can make a business decision as whether or not that need is worthy of spending money on an additional tool, rather than having an employee go out and buy something, use it, a free version of software or something like that, which can really be crippling to you as far as security and privacy compliance, not having data backed up, and loss of control and loss of governance. So it can be a huge problem. And it's relatively easy to prevent, and it's relatively easy to fix. Next up, latent apps and services. So again, these are applications and services that you as a company decided to subscribe to. Again, cloud is a really low barrier for entry, and you want to try new things, you add new services. This has happened to us. We were doing some project work with a couple of clients. We looked at a third-party project management tool. We liked it. We used it for those projects. Afterwards, we really didn't have a need. We weren't dealing with that many similar projects that we felt we had a need. Use of the tool sort of dropped off as those projects ended. And lo and behold, 6 months later, we're looking and saying, gee, we've been paying for this service for 6 months. Nobody's using it. Why are we spending that money? And so, we understand people want to be more efficient. It's easy to add in, but over time, your interests and needs shift. When latent apps happen, when that utilization drops off, oftentimes services sit idle, yet auto pays happen. And they just hit the credit card every month or every year. Or sometimes you even get the renewal notice and you're like, oh, do we need that? I'll put it in, I'll get back to it later. You never do. Next thing you know, the charge hits the credit card. So what do you want to do? Look for? You want to look for unused services. Again, go into those federated logins as an administrator for Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. Look for charges for services and apps you no longer need, want, or use on credit cards, either company cards or if they're showing up on employee expense reports. Also look for underutilized services. There are times where we'll see that, when we first rolled out this planning tool, I think we had a dozen licenses for ourselves and our clients. By the time we were on our third project, only 3 people needed it, yet here we were maintaining those 12 licenses. And so sometimes you might just reduce licenses to get the scope down. Other times you might look and say, hey, look, if only 3 people are using it, and there are other ways to do this, let's do it the other ways. It's not worth maintaining the infrastructure. And again, part of this is going to have conversations with your people. Ask them if they need it, what they were using it for, can we get rid of it? And ask people if they're using tools that aren't authorized, as both a latent app as well as shadow IT. Business continuity. People say, hey, we got backup and recovery. Yeah, it's not enough. In recent events and outages have shown that simply having the ability to back up, to recover your data in your systems isn't necessarily enough to keep your business running. Business continuity has a technology component, but it's really about keeping the business operational during a disaster or an unexpected event and limiting that operational downtime. And so the key concepts here that you should be looking for when you check your blind spot to see if you're covered is an understanding about how you would return to operations. This is not IT operations. This is business operations. What does it take to return so that your business can operate? Not operate normally, but operate well enough that you can continue running your business, serving your customers, interacting with your vendors. Now, so for example, you might have a business that, sells stuff online and you do a lot of shipping. You have a system failure. Excellent. You can still sell online. You might be handwriting UPS and FedEx labels and US mail labels to get things out, get packages out the door until your system that does that is back up and running. Okay. So return to operations, is the paper process, is the alternate service. Now, sometimes, and we offer these services as well, you can have technology help you do that. You can have images of your systems snapped multiple times a day, and the ability to spin those up in another data center and access them from alternate devices. And so complex businesses that really can't afford any downtime, there's a way to get RTO that's really quick and easy and doesn't involve scrambling with manual paperwork. The ultimate goal is returning to normal operations, or RTNO. And this is when not only is your business running, it's fully running, and your data information is restored. And what most people forget to realize when we talk to them about this, or they don't initially realize it until we have the conversation, is that you might have a system failure and you can keep your business running, hopefully within an hour or two. But then you're going to keep your business running while the repairs are made and the remediation is made to whatever went wrong. And once that happens, you still need to get your data back in, right? So there's this parallel operation where while you're trying to run your business, and even when you get to the point where you can start using your systems again, you have this period where you weren't using the systems. You've got to get that data and that information in place and adjusted and working. So we have found a couple of years ago, we actually did a study of customers that had IT disasters or faced natural disasters. And what we realized is that for every day of downtime, you had anywhere from 5 to 7 days to get back to normal operations. And so an outage where, even if you can get RTO within 2 hours, if it takes you 2 days to get it back to where everything's running normally again, it's going to take you another 10 to 14 days to get everything restored and back up so that you're truly at normal operations and all of your data is correct and secure. Next up is cyber insurance. The reality of the way we live right now, it's no longer a luxury, and it's a specialized underwriting. And a lot of businesses don't like to hear the latter. Like, I talked to my general business insurance agent. The company offers a policy. We signed up for it. They didn't really ask many questions. And we see a lot of companies being underinsured, paying exorbitant premiums, or applying for cyber insurance and being told that they're going to be rejected unless they deploy very specific security hardware and software, which oftentimes is enterprise grade and not geared at small businesses, but it's what the insurance companies know. And so understanding that it's specialized underwriting can help you come up with an action plan to keep this out of your blind spot. First is a self-assessment of risk that's realistic, what's important, what's not, what's norm for your industry, and what expectations there are. Then is to get your reasonable protections, including policies and procedures, in place. And so these are things we talked about: advanced threat protection, next-gen endpoint with detection and response, encryption, multi-factor authentication, recovery services. The better your protections that you have in place, particularly if they're backed by policies and procedures, the easier it is to get cyber insurance, to get the level of coverage you need based on the potential costs of a breach or an event, and the lower that premium is going to be. And so it's very important to work with a specialist in cyber insurance, either a broker who will work on your behalf and basically put your business out to bid with multiple underwriters, or an agent who represents hopefully more than one underwriter who can work with and create a competitive process for you in the policy writing. Okay, but don't apply until you're ready. And that will help make sure that you get adequate and appropriate coverage and reasonable premiums. You don't want to be paying for levels of coverage you don't need, and you don't want to be underinsured, and you want to be able to afford this. This is a new ongoing expense we have to build into our business operational and financial models. And finally, number 7, utilization. Multiple studies have shown that most businesses, particularly small, mid-sized businesses, only use about 15% of the capabilities of Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. It's not because we don't want to, but it's sort of what happens when we've got the change curve here, right? You implement something, there's change, people's productivity drops while they learn how to do their jobs in that new environment. We saw that when people moved to Microsoft 365. We saw it when people moved to Google Workspace. There's change in workflows and behaviors and patterns on how you do it. Even things like sharing a document as opposed to attaching it to an email and sending it around is a behavior change and a workflow change that can take a while to adopt. Well, when people get back to their prior level of productivity, they tend to level off and stay at that status quo. And what we have found and what studies have shown is that having education and training on those new systems, as well as ongoing support, can increase productivity on an individual and team basis by up to 60%. And that's where you see the bump up and the growth and leveling off at a higher level with the orange on the right-hand side of the graphic here. And the other thing we've learned is that adult learners do best, not when you put them in a class for half a day or for a week. That's good to get, it can be good in certain situations to get a lot of information quickly, but people need to understand what the capabilities of these tools are with respect to how they do their jobs every day so that they can decide which features and functions will help them be more effective and efficient personally and as members of their teams. And so tools and platforms like the Quick Help platform we offer, which provides periodic, weekly or bi-weekly videos that enhance people's awareness of capabilities in Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace that relate to their job function and their workflows, provides sort of that constant growth and learning and review process that results in the increased productivity over time. So when we talk about checking your blind spots, right? It's sort of knowing you have a blind spot is a big picture issue, and we sort of get in. The goal here is really not only to see the forest, but to see the trees and be able to do it at the same time, right? You know that IT is a comprehensive system that supports your business, hopefully well integrated, well secured, and very efficient for you, as well as cost effective. But the devil, or the challenge, if you will, can be in the details. And you have to look at the trees. And what we find is when, things are working and as IT systems evolve to meet the changing needs of the business, things are moving forward. Very rarely do people look back and say, hey, what's still back there? And by doing a periodic assessment, can identify, look into these blind spots, identify areas for cost savings, areas and sometimes no cost ways to improve security and improve efficiency. And so, as always, we talk about your next steps. One is to assess. Any sort of strategic IT service review or service review could help go through and help you look into those blind spots to see what's there. Now, at times, for example, we've seen tools being used in shadow IT that we've recommended the company adopt officially because it's serving a unique function and it's increased productivity and efficiency in certain areas. Others are like, hey, you guys are just, shoveling money out the door and giving it away. Once you get that review and the results, understand what the value proposition is to make any change and why you're doing it and how it's going to benefit the business. And that can be directly monetarily, it can be indirect through productivity gains, ease of use, better user interface and experience in your systems and how they operate, better collaboration capabilities or enabling better support for your hybrid or remote workers. All of those can be part of the value proposition, and they can be both tangible and intangible. Also consider the cost of inaction. If you don't make a change, how much is it costing you, not just in dollars, but in productivity and efficiency? From there, map out changes. Some will be simple, some will be more complex. We always look at strategy and tactics and resource and timing. Make IT changes within a context that makes sense for your business, and so you can minimize disruption and turbulence to your business cycle as well. And of course, once you have this in place, you actually have to pull the trigger, so to speak. You got to implement and manage that change, communicate, answer questions, and address concerns. Now, across all the 7 areas, we've got many resources in our resource library. I mentioned that earlier. You can grab onto that talk about elements of each of these blind spots and what you might be looking for. Or if you're more interested, you can feel free to contact us and have an introductory call about the topic with one of our cloud advisors. Send an email to info@cumulusglobal.com use the QR code or the bit.ly CG intro call link and reach out and schedule time to chat with one of them. And so that really wraps up the content for the day. Before we get into the Q&A session, I'm going to head off to our end slide and thank those who are watching us on demand and watching the recording. If you have any follow-up questions or interest, no matter how small or large, feel free to contact us. Information's up on the screen as well as that QR code. You can contact me directly. I will say that I'm not really great about answering my phone and worse about voicemail, so the best way to reach me is by email. I don't have an assistant, so you'll get an answer from me, or if I'm really swamped and it's appropriate, I will delegate to a member of my team and someone will get back to you directly. Or you can contact us through our general contact information. So for those watching on demand, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to wrap up the recording part of this thing, and hopefully we'll catch you next month as well. And for those who are here live, stay on the line and I'll head back to Q&A.